Good morning, Saturday the 2nd of January, 9 a.m. Here we are, bobbing about in a cold Clyde again. Why, oh why, oh why? Because it gives me focus, it gives me purpose, it gives me something to do, and it makes me feel good. And I like that, so I like that about it. So I put up a wee question last night for people about what they would like. I was needing a bit of inspiration about what people would like some vlogs on. So Heather Woods, a friend of mine, had said we are heading towards a mental health pandemic, right? And in actual fact, I thought about that. I sat down and gave it a wee bit of thought. And are we heading towards, good morning Mr. Laverty, are we heading towards a mental health pandemic, or are we already in a mental health pandemic? Now, when you look round about you, and are people's tempers higher? Are people using more drugs and alcohol? Are people more worried? Are people more fixated on perhaps watching the news? Now, there's loads and loads and loads of ways that your mental health could be jeopardised, okay? Now, the brain in itself is a pattern recognition device. The brain likes to recognise patterns. That's why we like to do familiar things and go familiar places and walk the same walks we've always walked. Like I go around Lanarkloch with the dog every morning, and when I go around Lanarkloch with the dog every morning, I go around exactly the same way. Now we're actually forced to go that way because there's signposts saying that you're only allowed to walk anti-clockwise rather than walking clockwise. But when you do start to do something differently, it feels unusual at first. Now, one of the things with this pandemic that I'm noticing personally is that the rules continually change. And I mentioned that with regards to the first lockdown. When we went into the first lockdown, it was a national lockdown. We were contained within the parameters. This is the rules. These are what we have to do. And now some counties are in Tier 3, some counties are in Tier 4, some counties are in Tier 2. The whole of Scotland right now is in Tier 4, but Tier 4 is a lockdown and the measures are completely different to that which they were back in March. Now, it's very tiring, it's exhausting for people to, like, okay, I might make an arrangement to get my hair done. I'll make an arrangement to get my hair done on the 28th of January. Okay, I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to that. The 28th of January comes and the hairdressers isn't open, right? And I know that's a really basic thing. It's not really a Maslow's hierarchy of needs getting your hair done, but it makes you feel good. For the ladies out there, a wee trip to the hairdressers makes you feel good. You get a wee bit of pampering, a bit of feminine chat, wee bit of chit-chat, makes you feel good. You book an appointment to go to the hairdressers, it gets cancelled. Good morning, Mr. Grant, I hope you're well. Right? So how do we remain positive? How do we remain focused? Okay? When the world seems to be going topsy-turvy round about us. Well, what that could be starting to indicate for us is, why are we allowing the external world to continually feed back to our inner state? And if we were connected to ourselves, which not many of us are, I'm certainly not. Good morning, Mr. Smith. Nice to connect with you, brother. I hope you're well. I meant to send you a wee message. Thanks for sending me the invite. It was nice to connect with you. I haven't seen you for ages. So, mental health and staying focused. So the brain's a pattern recognition device, and change, we actually don't like change, but the paradox of that is that in order for our species to survive, we've got to be okay with change, right? Because it's not the most intelligent that survive, it's not the richest that survive, and it's certainly not the strongest of our species that have survived. The ones that have survived are the ones that are able to adapt to change and move fluidly and transition between one set of parameters and another. Now, that's why we find it so difficult to deal with grief and loss. But that's something that's not really being spoke about right now either. There's a lot of kind of shouting around about our civil rights are getting taken away and our natural state of being is changing. But a lot of us are in a grief cycle. A lot of us aren't able to do the things that we were used to doing, like our job, the camaraderie that we got. Even if we didn't like people at work, we'd still get a wee bit of banter with them. It would still make us feel positive. All these kind of things have all been stripped away from us, right? So, my suggestion here is, how do you remain constant? Well, rather than focusing on what's going on outside you and what's going on in other people's lives, which we probably did, but to a lesser degree it was noticed previously. Now, because things have shut down, a lot of people are noticing like what the neighbours have got and how the neighbours are managing and how this one's managing this and how's that one managing that and what's that. And a lot of the attention has changed. So, give me a second. I've just got to get ready to get out here in a minute. So, starting to become aware of your own biochemical factory, starting to become aware of your own inner way of being. Now, like, if you're not a mechanic, Big Stevie Smith's watching this. Big Stevie Smith's a mechanic. He knows a bit about cars, right? So when something goes up with a car, we automatically think it could be monumental. Whereas when you take it to an expert, that expert is able to identify the problem and rectify it quicker. Now, nobody has actually ever sat down and gave us any emotional intelligence to the degree that we don't know what's going on inside this vehicle, right? So this body that we inhabit, this vehicle that we inhabit, is made up of, like, the human organism is an electrochemical organism that lives inside a biochemical bodysuit, and where we inhabit this electromagnetic field, right? So our brain is electrical. Every thought that we have is an electrical charge going off in our brain, right? The synapses are firing and they're creating electricity. That electricity can be measured. Look, that electricity can be measured, like, off the top of my head. Always made me wonder when I look at stained glass window and you saw those kind of enlightened ones in the churches. They always had the bright Philips bulb above their head, didn't they? Right? So I thought somebody's away with my t-shirt, but I've hung it on the tree. See, my t-shirt's over there hanging on the tree. My wardrobe, my wilderness wardrobe. So, human beings are an electrochemical organism that inhabits this biochemical bodysuit. So every thought that you have is electrical, right? So if you have a thought of love or peace, you get oxytocin, right? You get a chemical. So cocaine makes you feel different from heroin. Heroin makes you feel different from alcohol. Different types of alcohol make you feel different ways. As you've heard before, people say it would be like feeding fire water to the Indians, you know, about whiskey. A lot of people don't drink whiskey because it sends them off their head. Now, if you can identify with that analogy that I'm making around about different types of chemicals make you feel different ways, okay, then we've got different chemicals that go on inside our body all the time that make us feel different, right? So if you're focusing on fear, right, you're going to be getting a lot of, oh, well, okay, so there's different areas in the brain that would be happening with. So that would be like the hypothalamus, then into the amygdala. So then we would treat fear. Right, let's just for an argument say, we'll keep it simple, but let's just say for an argument that if you are focusing on fear, you would be getting adrenaline, right? It's actually a lot more complicated than that, but my brain's frozen to get into it, right? Now, adrenaline and the fear response to how you're managing your environment, right, is indicative of how you're going to feel, right? So if you're starting to feel, so if you've got loads of adrenaline inside your body, right, that is then going to cause inflammation. Inflammation in the body, everything's going to start to become inflamed, and then when we've got inflammation in our body, we are then more susceptible to depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD. That's another thing about what's happening in this pandemic, because people who may have already had slight tendencies towards OCD, which wasn't full-blown, This pandemic, everywhere you go into Tesco's, they're offering you hand sanitisers, they're telling you to wash your hands all the time, they're telling you to do that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, but if you're already susceptible to have perhaps traits of slight compulsive disorders, then this pandemic is only increasing the fact that you're being forced to have to wash your hands and clean your hands and do all that kind of stuff. So that then could be igniting. So this was some of the conversation we were having around about this pandemic and how OCD could be just one of the many other attributes to what is going to be starting to affect our mental health going forward. And it's not that we are... Sorry, just getting dressed there. I was focusing on getting myself ready. Right. So, people are thinking we could be on the wave of a mental health pandemic. What if we're already in it? And what if that mental health pandemic has actually been like in flow for a considerably long time? Now, I was having a chat just the other day there, like mental health, anxiety, depression. When I was a wee guy, I didn't know a lot of people that had anxiety, and I certainly didn't have it. And I work in schools with children. You know, there's in certain regions in Renfrewshire, there's a counsellor in every secondary school. Place to Be is another organisation which I've worked for as well, offering play and art therapy to primary school children. Now, in certain localities, there's counsellors in there. So, what is it that's actually going on in our society that's causing mental health to be on the rise? Because it's been rising prior to this pandemic. Because there have been counsellors in schools for the last 5 years, right? That was long before this pandemic. So, how can we start to look at mental health and its causes somewhat differently? So, when I was in Canada, and I put up a post yesterday with Coco Jones. So Native people, Native American Indians, for example, First Nations people, to put them by the right title, they started to experience a change which caused a lot of alcoholism and a lot of abuse within their clan, if you like, right? So what was the cause of that? What caused that? Well, then you look at it as a social issue. Well, the government came along, white man came along, stole their land, took all their fishing rights away from them, dumped them on a reserve, and gave them Christianity. Okay, so, and not that I'm blaming governments here, but we have to look, I think, rather than it being the individual and what's going on collectively that's causing the amount of drug use in our society, which I work with and see day in, day out, right? The amount of alcoholism, the amount of abuse, the amount of violence, the amount of young men that are taking their lives to suicide. So that was happening before the pandemic. So we can't blame COVID-19 for that. There's something far wrong with our society when children are going to school hungry and people are relying on food banks to feed their children and feed themselves. Now, there's no infrastructure, there's a loss of jobs. And as we were talking in our walking group a couple of Wednesday nights ago, work gives you so much more than money. We need a purpose, but our purpose is perhaps something slightly different than what's forced upon us. Is it our purpose to drive a Rolls Royce or a Range Rover? People think that gives them purpose. People think that gives them meaning. But I have had very, very wealthy men and women in my clinic, and very few of them are able to feel the wealth that they have. They're able to accept. And some of them that have got massive amounts of money are the unhappiest people I've ever met. So it's not necessarily that the issues are stemming from this pandemic, but people have become so dissociated from their natural way of being that it's caused unhappiness, disconnection. Disconnection from what? You know, I pray. I don't always remember to do it. There's nights and mornings that I forget. But when you get yourself into a commitment, like coming to the water every morning, that's a commitment for me. Does the water have health benefits? Of course it does. Does nature have health benefits? Of course it does. But the biggest benefit for me is actually getting out and doing something every day which is beneficial to my health. Now, prayer for me, it's just like meditation. I find it helpful, and it allows me to think about someone. In you go, buddy. It allows me to think about something other than me for 5 or 10 minutes and think about, look, you're not going to believe it. I can't get in my car. Huh. I'm locked out, I'm frozen. Right, so, oh God, oh well, I'll have to figure this one out. There's always a way, isn't there? Hi Ralph, your dad's locked out the car. Right, so while I'm figuring that out, I'll just say the last bit of it. So, what have we become disconnected from? We've become so disconnected from ourselves. We've become so disconnected from our natural habitat. We've become so disconnected from, like, everybody's really, really comfortable. Everybody wants to be comfortable. Everybody wants the comforts of life. But when you've got all those comforts, how much are you able to rely on your body's own ability to give you a sense of authority, if you like, you know? So yeah, we're going to be blogging a little bit more about mental health and keep on that. But you know, the hardest step that we ever take in anything that we do is the first step. You know, the first step towards something. And I know it's hard for a lot of people. I know it's really, really hard for a lot of people when they're in the clutches of depression to break that cycle of depression. And a lot of people feel lost within it. And as I started to talk about the other day there, like, I really don't see depression as being a problem. I see depression as being a solution. I see that I think we've got everything completely and utterly upside down. And I think that depression is just the body's way of protecting us from something that it's got a sense of that's going on in the external world. So I'm starting to rattle here with the cold, and I need to go and try and get myself into my car that's frozen solid. My car's stuck. You've got to love Land Rover Defenders, haven't you? And that's another reason why I drive one of these, because they're so uncomfortable, right? And I don't actually like being comfortable any longer. I hate it. There was times in my life where I thought I was comfortable and I was really unhappy. Whereas I challenge myself to do things that make me uncomfortable all the time, like doing this, right? I don't really like doing this, but it's difficult, but there's a little group of us do them. I've got some buddies that do them too. And we've came to the decision, if one person doesn't tie a belt around their neck and hang themselves because we've said something that's helpful or we've described our own story, then that's why we're doing it. Drive a Land Rover Defender because it's really uncomfortable. Most of the time I've got to drive it with the window down to get my arm out because you're sitting in it like this, right? And that's why I like it. I like things that make me feel uncomfortable now. And because when I thought I was comfortable, that's when I was uncomfortable. And I wasn't relying on myself. I was expecting the external world to take care of me. I don't need the external world to take care of me. I take care of me. And people that I thought when my life was easier, my life actually wasn't easier. It's not easier at all. It's nonsense. So have a fantastic Saturday. You want to say cheerio, Ralph? Say goodbye. Imagine you did say goodbye. I wouldn't need to do vlogs any longer, would I? Be multi-millionaire overnight. So, have a fantastic day, everybody. And send me a thought when I'm sitting here trying to get into my car that's frozen in the middle of nowhere. Right? I'll go and get on that. Have a great day. God bless.